it going, everybody? Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by Christian Slater. Christian, regretfully, how are you doing this week?
Man, all week I was hoping you would fall in a river. Now I gotta go to Plan B and find a hammer.
How? I don't know how I was going to fall into a river. We don't live near a river. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. I guess it's hammer time I need to look out for these days. Wonderful. So yeah, this week was kind of a light week. I don't know if that was because here in America we had 4th of July, so maybe people are off, but not too much in the way of video game news. But we rounded up some stuff, and so I kind of made it a point to try out a little bit more gaming get a little bit more gaming into the schedule this week. So I guess we will start things off with Home Safety Hotline, which I put a video up on the channel last week of me playing through the entirety of their Steam Next Fest demo. So when the Next Fests happen, I really try to do my research and find stuff that I'm interested in and I think would be interesting to talk about here on the channel. And this one just completely went by me. I didn't see it in any of like the recaps that websites did for like, hey, here are the things you need to check out. You know, there's always like fantastic Reddit thread of people saying, you know, everything that they played and writing up descriptions. I think Kotaku ran an article. There's a couple other places that did, and I don't remember seeing it anywhere. It wasn't until I watched Nextlander's video of them doing their kind of roundup of Next Fest stuff, and I saw it, and I was definitely interested in it from the get-go when they explained the premise of it and they started actually playing through it. And then they got to the point where there is a section that is 100% definitely influenced by Longmont Potion Castle. And if you're not familiar with Longmont Potion Castle or LPC, he is a man from Colorado who has been doing prank phone call compilations for a long time now. I want to say late 80s, early 90s. You know, he's been doing it for quite some time. And I found out about him through, I want to say it was Jeff Gersman always making references to him on Giant Bomb. And finally one day I decided, like, I really need to kind of check this out. And I listened to a couple, and maybe I just picked some bad ones to listen to. And I was like, oh, you know, they're fine, but they're whatever. And then it wasn't until I really started digging in due to somebody brought up a specific one, and I started listening to it, and I could not control myself from laughing. It was some of the funniest stuff I have ever heard. He really screws around with like effects. Like he runs his stuff through like guitar pedals. So there's like delay and reverb, and he'll do like looping effects. He'll frequently like conference call in unwilling or unknowing people and mess with them. At one point, he connects 4 different Radio Shacks together on the same call, and they're all looking for the same made up piece of equipment. He prank phone calls the Army at one point, which is absolutely one of the best of all time. He prank phone calls a GameStop, which is really good. He calls a guy and tells him that he's going to get arrested because he pressed all the buttons in an elevator. Like, some of the stuff is just so absurd, but he's just so effective with it. And there's a section of Home Safety Hotline where somebody calls in, or there's actually 2 people that call in, and it is heavily affected, like reverb and weird noises and all this stuff. And it's using a lot of the same language that he uses. And it's very clear that it's like, okay, somebody that's making this game is obviously very heavily influenced. So Home Safety Hotline, if you didn't watch the video that I put up, it is a game where you are interacting with like a piece of software. It's, you know, looks like Windows 95 kind of, and people are calling in. You're like a customer service representative for the Home Safety Hotline. So somebody will call in and be like, hey, I have X problem. And you'll have a list of potential causes of that problem. And a lot of them are locked. Through the demo, you unlock a second set. And I'm sure obviously once the full game is out, you know, you'll get all of them. And they start off and they're pretty benign. Like, oh, you have a gopher in your yard, or, you know, hey, your kid might have caught a tick while mowing the yard or something like that. And then when the the second round pops up, you start getting like demons in the house and wood secretions and giant slugs on your staircase and people calling in with like progressively weirder things that are happening to them. And there's just like this like layer. It becomes less, it starts off very subtle, but it eventually is like, to be honest, it's like hammering you in the face by the end of it. That obviously like this is a very like surreal and warped kind of thing. And there is a larger thing going on, but it is, it's really, really well made. It's really effective when it comes to the voice acting, which is obviously like very amateurish, but you kind of want that, you know? Everybody is kind of over the top. Like there's a guy that calls and he's like, you know, claiming that it's Bob from accounting breaking into his house and organizing his files in the middle of the night and like weird stuff like that. But it is such an odd little thing that I am so glad exists. The only thing I wish it had was I wish we knew when it was coming out. The trailer for the game just says wishlist now. The Steam page just says wishlist now. Nothing of the sort when it comes to an actual firm release date. I started following the developer on Twitter just in case. They post something about there, but hey, Twitter, everything's on Threads now, man. We're on Threads. I'm all in on Threads. Go find Perfect Reload Laboratories on Instagram and Threads. It's good stuff there. Good shit. But this is like rocketed towards like, obviously, I've talked about that I am highly anticipating Starfield, Spider-Man 2, but it's like Home Safety Hotline is like right up there now. Like, man, I cannot wait for this thing to come out. When this thing comes out, like we will, play it again, obviously, but I don't know, maybe we could do like a full playthrough of it. Because I can't imagine it's gonna be like super long, a couple hours or something like that. The demo's like 20 minutes. But that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I definitely urge you, if you're looking for something weird, off kilter, check out the video if you want, but download the demo for yourself and play around with it because it's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool.
I had an out of robot body experience watching you play this game. It was as if you finally hear what it sounds like to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, no, it's the other way around, asshole, man. Talking to you is like being prank phone called on a nonstop basis. Yeah. All right. So moving on, beyond that, there was a new release this week that I checked out called Feeble Light. And it is a shmup, bullet hell, if you will, and it's done in that vertical style. So the screen is actually like a vertical, kind of like I guess the analog these days would be like if you're playing like a cell phone game or something like that. Tate mode, for the OGs. It's got a very, pixel based style, limited color palette. That's kind of like their thing is it's like they use that in like the marketing and the description of the game is that it's a very limited color palette. You can unlock new color palettes as you play through the game. And it kind of differentiates itself from other shmups in the fact that everything is very big. If you've ever played like a bullet hell game before, like Dononpachi, Gunbird, stuff like that, everything is usually very small, like in like Ikaruga, like the bullets coming at you almost look like falling flower petals. And so it becomes very much like a game of like finesse and skill to nimbly dodge in between those bullets and kind of fire back. I think one of the things for people that look at one of those games and they're trying to wrap their heads around, like, how do you actually play one of these things? It becomes less of like, looking at the enemies on the screen and trying to hit them rather than just constantly firing bullets and paying attention to the oncoming bullets to maneuver them around. And, over the course of time, you'll do enough damage to, make it through the level. I played a lot of shmups in my time, so it's one of those things where if a new one comes out and it's got an interesting art style or just, kind of looks like a throwback, like it becomes instantly on my radar and I want to check it out. My biggest gripe with Feeble Light, and I will say that these gripes are very minor because this game is under $5. It's just a couple of bucks. There's no like manual or anything to explain controls, which is fine. You go in and you just hammer on the buttons real quick and kind of figure out what everything does. But the one thing that I couldn't figure out was there was like a second firing button. You know, you press one button and it would fire your bullets, press another button, it would still fire bullets, but then like these like lines, almost like crosshairs, would appear on the screen, and you would have like a heart above your or on your ship, and I like could not figure out what that is. I ended up looking it up afterwards. Apparently that is a alternate version of just moving. Like if you hold that down, you move slower to kind of navigate through what's on the screen easier. So I guess knowing that, you know, it helps a little bit. There is a section in the second level where you're kind of going through, I guess the best way to describe it would be like a canyon where there are actually like walls on the side that kind of move around like a river sort of, and you have to, you know, get your way through it. You have a bomb button, just like, you know, pretty much every other shmup that's ever existed. There are some meters on the screen that are not explained whatsoever, what they do, how you refill them. It's a little odd in that regard. But going back to the fact that like everything is really big, kind of in a way makes it a little bit more difficult. Everything is so large that dodging things really is kind of hard to do. Now, I'm sure like more time spent with the game, you get used to it and you kind of figure it out. From what I can tell, it's not a very long game, only 6 levels. There's only 6 levels and I got halfway through it on my first playthrough. It's, you know, it's, if you're into this kind of genre, if you're into shmups, for a couple of bucks, yeah, pick it up. It's, you know, it's worth it for that regard. But, you know, it's been a recurring theme I have noticed, and I wish I could remember what the other game was. We either talked about it last week or the week before, where it might have even been for AEW, where, you know, a large argument in video games for a long time, and I think it was a very valid argument for a long time, was over tutorialization. You know, you would be playing a game and you were constantly stopped, constantly interrupted for a tooltip to pop up on the screen. You know, a lot of hand holding, things like that. And it seems like there's been a bunch of releases over the past year, 2 years, where there's a severe lack of tutorialization, and you find yourself not really understanding how to play the game. And especially if it's like a really small new game like Feeble Light is, there's not a lot of information out on the internet. It's not like you could just search and have things instantly and easily pop up. When I checked, their Steam community page had 2 posts total. And so it becomes difficult, and that happened with AEW. When AEW came out, there were a severe lack of control information in that game, in both the controls actual screen where you could change button layout and their actual, you know, sort of written tutorial section, which is severely lacking and missing some very key components of how that game plays. And even that, you know, certainly not a huge game by any stretch, but a game that was going to sell certainly more copies than your run-of-the-mill indie game the first day it came out. And the fact that I had to go online to try and figure out how to do controls, and just seeing post after post after post of people posting the same questions with no answers, it's like, come on, like somebody from their PR department or their community team needs to be able to see that stuff and say like, hey guys, maybe we should put a tutorial out, or maybe we should patch this game and put some stuff in there. Like it becomes a little difficult. Now, with Feeble Light, there's obviously very limited controllers. There's only 3 buttons total. You would eventually figure it out through trial and error. But it is a little sad that we've gotten to the point where some games are just like, hey, we're not going to tell you how to actually play this game. There's no button layout to look at. There's no tutorial. Just here you go. I don't think that that's necessarily fair. Even if you don't want to put it in the game, have it on your website, have it on your Steam page, post a graphic on your Twitter or something like that. Like, at least get the information out there in some manner, even if you don't want to put it in the game proper. So that's a little weird. But Feeble Light, I recommend for a couple of bucks. If it was more than $5, I'd be like, you know, maybe. But I think I think I paid $3.99 or $2.99, something like that. It's one of those Steam games where the day it comes out, it's already 10%, 15% off or whatever it is. But yeah, for $5 or less, definitely recommend it. I think you will get $5 worth of enjoyment out of it if you're a fan of the shmup genre. All right. Moving on, I played a lot of AEW Fight Forever over the week. It's becoming one of those games, much like MLB The Show, which I still play every day, that is a great game to put on mute and catch up on your podcast, watch YouTube, watch a movie, watch an episode of a TV show, whatever it may be. So I played a lot more of it, and I am definitely enjoying it much more than I was when it first came out. I am actively having fun with the game. I am looking forward to playing it. It's still none of my gripes and concerns and criticisms about that game when I made that initial video and first talked about it on the show have disappeared. None of those things have been patched out. None of those things have been addressed. It is still very much a bare bones experience that is being asking of you a full price commitment with your wallet. So I'm still not thrilled about that, but that's at this point, enough information is out about this game, and the lack of content within that it's on you if you decide to spend the money on the game and are disappointed with what you get. There's enough information out there that you can make an informed decision. But I think it really clicked with me. I was having a match the other day, again, just against the CPU and doing like their super hardcore lights out mode. And, you don't know what weapons you're going to get because there's a lot of weapons in the game. I think there's only over like 50 weapons in the game. And I ended up grabbing a bag of thumbtacks underneath the ring and, spread them out amongst the ring and was throwing my opponent into them and seeing the blood come off, seeing the animation of them being hurt, it being really interesting. And actually, like, there's some really smart things that they do with it where I had kind of placed the thumbtack sort of in the middle of the ring. So I had put him up onto the turnbuckle to try and do like a big move, like a superplex or something off the top rope to get him to land into the thumbtacks, right? Well, I tried doing that, but the character I was using didn't really have a move like that. So he landed, when the move finished, my opponent landed near the thumbtacks, but after the initial hit, he kind of bounced into the thumbtacks, and the animation actually reacted to him being hurt by those thumbtacks. And I was like, man, that's like actually pretty cool. And I found out later that you could actually, like, if the thumbtacks are in like one corner of the ring, let's say, and you're on the other side, you could press the button to drag your opponent, move them around, and you can drag them through the thumbtacks. And I was like, man, they there is a severe lack of content in this game, but there is a severe attention to detail as well in this game, which is pretty cool. And it also helps that there have been some YouTube videos coming out of people kind of like discovering some interesting things you can do in the game, interesting interactions you can do with the environment when you're wrestling in the arena. Hidden animations, hidden moves, some things you can do with the character customization stuff. And so it's kind of like, we're starting to get a lot more information about this game, and it's getting to the point where it's like, there's a lot in this game in one regard, just not a lot in some major regards. So it really kind of comes down to, like, if this is a game that you're actually just going to go in there and wrestle, and that's all you want to do, you just want to do that. You don't care about the lack of certain modes. You don't care about the lack of parts in the Create a Wrestler. You don't care about the fact that you can't share Create a Wrestlers, like all that stuff. If you just want to get in there and actually play the game, there is a lot for you to do. And there is a lot of replayability. It's just one of those things where it's like, the roster's not super big. You can't necessarily supplement it in a real meaningful way with the create a character stuff, although it does seem like the PC version is getting closer and closer to kind of being cracked open. I saw some screenshots floating around online that I'm not quite sure are photoshopped or not, but it looks like people have been able to get into the create a wrestler mode in there and apply some textures from outside the game and make some like really nice, almost looking like they were made by the developers, create a wrestlers of wrestlers from like New Japan or WWE, stuff like that, outside companies. So I've definitely turned the table on it. I still don't think it's worth $60. I still certainly don't think it's worth $80 if you bought the elite version of the game like I did. And I definitely think that it is a little, I don't want to say predatory, because predatory is a word I usually reserve for games that have like currency, especially like the blind bag aspect stuff, like Ultimate Team, Diamond Dynasty, stuff like that. So it's not quite predatory, but it's also kind of like, you release this game that's lacking in content and we're charging full price for it, but also, hey, on day one, there's a bunch of DLC for characters that could have just been in the game by default. So, so you take that as you will, but I definitely don't think it is I think I have gone past the fact where I think it's a bad game, and now I think it's just a disappointing game. And a disappointing game isn't necessarily a bad game. A disappointing game can have great elements to it. Like, I am having fun with playing the game. It's just disappointing that it's missing a lot of, like what I said before, common sense features for a wrestling game to have in 2023. So, take that as you will with that. All right, so to round out what I played this week, it's something that I actually haven't really played. I've just been preparing to play. So the Steam summer sale was going on, and I've always kind of been hit or miss over the past few years with Steam sales. A lot of times it's stuff that I've either already picked up, stuff that I already own, or maybe the discount just isn't there quite yet for me. So it's, I don't pick up stuff every time, but I decided to spend a little bit of money this summer and grab some things. And one of the things I grabbed was Red Dead Redemption 2. So in my YouTube recommended videos, I don't know why, but I've been getting a bunch of Red Dead Redemption 2 videos kind of tossed my way. And so I started watching somebody play the game. And, I played the game before. I bought the game. I actually went to, I think it was the last time I could really think. I actually went to the midnight release for Red Dead Redemption 2. I actually bought, so that afternoon, I went and bought an Xbox Series X. Oh, I'm sorry, an Xbox One X. This is last gen. I bought an Xbox One X that afternoon, came back a few hours later at midnight, grabbed my copy of Red Dead 2 to play. And, played through the game at launch. I played through the game again when it went to Game Pass a couple of years ago. And then, just moved on to other games, as you do. But I've been getting all these videos recommended to me of people playing this game. And I was like, man, that game is super immersive. And there are a lot of really cool things to do with that game. And I was like, you know what? I wonder if I could pick up the PC version of it and play it in ultra wide and experience it kind of in a different way a little bit. And then the gears kind of got turning in my head is like, well, if I'm going to buy it on PC, what if I just start modding it? What if I just start doing some research on Red Dead 2 mods? So I went down a big rabbit hole. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos, read a bunch of articles online about, here are the Red Dead 2 mods to check out. So I downloaded a bunch. I got them installed. I booted the game up yesterday to make sure that it actually worked, and seemingly it did. I didn't play enough of it to find out if every mod worked, because some of the mods that I installed, aren't going to become apparent until a few hours. If you remember that game, you're kind of locked into a very small area in the beginning of that game before it kind of opens up. So it would take me, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours of gameplay to kind of get to the point where I can check to see if everything I got installed. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through the opening section of the game on my own time. And then I think maybe we'll do a stream, because I've been kind of struggling, maybe isn't the best word, but I've been trying to figure out, what do I want to stream lately? Because there hasn't been a lot of new releases coming out. The last stream we did, I played an hour's worth of old arcade games, and we kind of hung out and did that. So I think I might do a stream coming up. Hopefully I have enough time to play through this week and make enough progress, and we'll do here's a whole bunch of mods in Red Dead 2 and kind of screw around with that. Because I installed some ones that change the physics of the game. I installed some ones that make it kind of more violent, bloodier, stuff like that. Just to kind of screw around with it and see how it is. And so maybe we'll do that in the near future. And then the other thing that I picked up, just because I figured it's probably the cheapest it's going to get until the expansion comes out, I picked up Cyberpunk on PC, because I initially played it through on Xbox. And I double checked my Xbox save to make sure that my save was still there because it's been so long since I've had the game installed. Now, I always thought that the save would just kind of be there, but there was another older game that I was thinking about going back to on Xbox that I installed, and my save was gone. And I was like, that's weird. But I double checked, and my save was still there from Cyberpunk. So I was like, all right, well, I have a complete game save ready to go for when Phantom Liberty comes out in September. But man, I have a PC that can run Cyberpunk now. I kind of want to see what it would look like on PC. I certainly don't have the setup to do like that psycho ray tracing that came out. I don't have a 40 series card. So I can't do any of that. But I think at the very least, I'd be able to get this game looking nicer than it does on an Xbox. And they have made so many changes since that game. So when Cyberpunk came out, I had it finished in 72 hours. I didn't even get to experience any of the very early patches that were fixing a lot of the bugs. I played through a very buggy, screwed up version of that game all the way to completion. And it's not like I really super rushed. I mean, I did over the course of those 3 days, I put in 40 hours. I mean, I was playing it like nonstop for those first 3 days. And then I kind of, after the game was done, I went back in, over the next couple of weeks and kind of screwed around with some side missions with a, end game save and all that. But I think one of the things I want to do is I kind of want to boot the game up and mod it right now to see what the current mod scene is like for Cyberpunk, and then remove all those mods for when Phantom Liberty comes out, because they're doing such a huge overhaul of the game in general for Phantom Liberty that I kind of want to compare and contrast the two. So maybe as we get closer to Phantom Liberty coming out, maybe I'll stream some modded Cyberpunk and we can take a look at that and then compare and contrast, because when Phantom Liberty comes out, we will definitely be covering it here on the channel, with both obviously talking about it in this show, but I will definitely be recording some gameplay of it for when that comes out. We are going to be super busy in September and October on this channel with I'm planning a lot of stuff for Starfield. We'll be doing Phantom Liberty, and then obviously in October when Spider-Man comes out, we'll have plenty of gameplay to go around for those games. But that was pretty much everything I got to this week. So yeah, we'll be back in a few moments with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and we are continuing our look at this Microsoft FTC trial, even though they are done for now. But an interesting thing came out earlier this week where Microsoft says that they fully expect Sony to launch a $400 PlayStation 5 Slim console at some point this year.
I think I'm gonna get a slimmer body. This TV is a little too bulky for my taste. I need something sleek and smooth, like Michael Phelps in his prime. Abs you can grate cheese on.
Yeah. Cool. Good luck with that. I think this is kind of, I don't know, maybe Microsoft is on to something, but they feel like this is going to happen, but I don't know. That's a big price cut, with both PlayStation and Xbox releasing, price increases, around the world. Do we really think that Sony is going to release a disc-based, which is $100 more than the discless version of the regular PlayStation 5, for the same price as the discless, like just a $100 price cut right off the bat with a newer console? I don't think that they would do any technical differences to it. No performance boost. This isn't a PlayStation 5 Pro or anything like that. But that seems odd. I don't think that that's going to happen, but I could be totally wrong. It just doesn't seem like something Sony is going to do right now. They are doing perfectly fine selling that system at $500. Are they going to do a slim version in the future? They've done a slim PS2, a slim PS1, a slim PS3, a slim PS4. Yeah, probably. They probably will at some point. But I don't think it's going to happen right now, and I certainly don't think it's going to be $100 less, because that would put so much more distance between them and Xbox. It would be absolutely ridiculous. But how much money would they be losing on that? Because wasn't the thing going around that they lose money on every PS5 that's made, and to add another $100 on top of that, like I don't know, I just don't see it coming. And then there's there's another piece of this where Microsoft also says that they are preparing, they believe Sony is preparing to launch a PlayStation 5 Pro. I think that a PlayStation 5 Pro will probably happen. I don't think it's going to happen this year. And I also think that if it is going to happen, it's going to come out before any type of Slim with a $100 price cut happens. Or they happen at the same time where they say, hey, you can get a regular PlayStation 5 now in the Slim version for $100 less, or for $600 or whatever it's going to be, you can get this PlayStation 5 Pro. I think that when we got the half step last time around, we got the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X. Those felt kind of needed in a way. Now that generation could have certainly finished out without ever having that happen. But I think we would have run into some issues with some games that were coming out. Because if you remember, there were certainly games coming out like Last of Us Part 2, God of War on the PlayStation side. Less so much on the Xbox side because they just didn't have that much in the way of exclusives. But there were reports of those games having some problems on the base PS4 console. Not necessarily like, oh, it's stuttering or something like that, but I mean, I know people that were playing God of War on a PS4 regular, not a Pro, and it sounded like a jet engine was inserted into their console. Like it sounded rough. And, people are obviously very concerned about that. So I think in some ways the half steps were kind of justified. I was somebody that when the PS4 Pro came out, I got one pretty close to when it came out. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I mean, within a month or so of it coming out. And then the I keep saying Series X, the Xbox One X. Like I said, not that long ago, I got it whenever Red Dead Redemption 2 came out. I don't remember how long between the release of that console and the release of Red Dead 2 was, but that was when I got it. So I ended up with both of them. I'm always somebody that gets every system for the most part. Yes, I don't have a Switch right now, but at one point I did have a Switch and a PS5 and an Xbox Series X. It just got to the point where I couldn't justify the Switch anymore and got rid of it. So I always try to get everything, but not everybody can do that. Not everybody is super interested in video gaming to the point where they want to own every system. Some people have a particular system because that's the system that their friends play, or that was the system that they could afford at the time, or whatever it was. But I think more so than ever right now, a half step at this point is really unnecessary, except for greed and profit making, oh my God, we're running out of my head. Reasons, I guess. Reasons of making money. We still really haven't seen what these consoles can do. There's been hints of it, certainly, with stuff like Ratchet and Clank. And I'm sure Spider-Man will do some interesting stuff. Elden Ring did some, pushing things forward a little bit. But we really haven't had like some serious exclusives. There's so many games that are still multiple generations. We're not really getting, these big exclusives that are developed entirely for these consoles. Now they are starting to come out towards the end of this year. Starfield, Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man. We're getting them certainly, but they're not here yet. When the PS5 launched, there was 2 games that were exclusive to the PS5. It was the Pac-In game and Demon Souls. It was even Miles Morales, which looks great on a PS5. They had a PS4 version. They had to develop both. So I don't really think they're necessary. Is it going to happen at some point? Yeah, it's going to happen at some point. I think it would be a mistake for a PS5 Pro to even come out in 2024. If they want to do it in 2025, sure, I guess that would make sense. To be 5 years after the system came out. Okay. I think that makes a little bit more sense. I'm sure that they would like to get it out sooner than that, and maybe they will. Maybe next Christmas, that's the big thing, is the PS5 Pro. And, Microsoft has said that they don't have any plans to do one for the Xbox. Who knows? That could change. But I don't know. the Slim this year, I think that's a little far-fetched. I don't really see a Slim happening this year. We're already into July, and they haven't announced it. They didn't announce it during their showcase. Like, I guess they could pull off another showcase next month, September, and say, hey, around Thanksgiving time, when people start buying Christmas presents, it'll be out. Like, I don't know. I think we would probably know a little bit more about it at this point through leaks or whatever, if it was actually going to happen. Let's see. Let's move on to some Capcom news. We haven't talked about Capcom in a while. So Capcom kind of started talking about some older games this week, and one of the things they talked about was Mega Man. And Mega Man in the past 15 years has had 3 main entries. There have obviously been some spin-off games and compilations and things like that. They said that the latest compilation for the Mega Man franchise, the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection, which came out in April, has now sold more than 1 million copies. The last Mega Man game that was like a core Mega Man game, Mega Man 11, came out quite some time ago. It says that they are considering how to approach the production of new entries in the series, which requires numerous factors, including the development of a solid concept, ideas, and gameplay. Yes, I mean, that is how anything gets created. You need to have a solid concept and, an idea of what the game is going to be. But Mega Man is one of those things where it's kind of like Sonic, right? Where there was a time and place for those games. And it was, in the 80s and even into the 90s. But to me, obviously Sonic didn't get started until the 90s. Mega Man was, on the original NES. But Mega Man had kind of started to fall away by the time the mid-90s roll around. Like, yes, the Mega Man X games were popular, but they were not as popular as the original 6 on the NES. Great games to play. But Mega Man X2 and X3 were kind of limitedly released. And have since become very expensive. There are ways to play them. There's, like I said, there's a lot of compilations and things like that. But, even up until that stuff started happening, when the whole retro collection boom kind of took off around 2011, 2012, like in that range, those games were desirable, but a lot of people weren't willing to drop the money on them. I remember Mega Man X3, a cartridge, 2012, $300, something like that. I mean, it was pretty expensive. I was working at a retro video game store at the time. We would get it. I worked there for 4 years. I think maybe we got 2 or 3 copies. They were very, very expensive. And, they kind of just put people off of it. And I say it's similar to Sonic because Sonic never really evolved. They certainly tried with Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast, and that was successful to a degree. But Sonic never really got past its original incarnation because there's still 2D side-scrolling Sonic games coming out. We have a new one coming out, soon. And they never really solved a lot of the problems that prevented Sonic from becoming as widely adopted as Mario, whereas Mario really pushed things forward and continued to grow and continued to advance. From Mario 64 to Mario Sunshine to the Galaxy games to Odyssey, they really kept Mario relevant to gaming trends at the time, whereas Sonic and Mega Man never were able to do that. They tried with Mega Man, is it Legacy? Was that the third person ones that were on the PS1? They tried and it just didn't work. And then they tried offshooting into the kind of like the tactical stuff with the Battle Network. And those were certainly popular, selling 1 million copies of that compilation. It's, certainly not nothing. But it just never broke through, right? Like it never got to that next step on the ladder, whereas something like Mario just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And obviously with Mario, they still kept making side-scrolling Mario games. We're getting a new one this year, but they were able to kind of continue to make them fresh and not just appeal to the people that were playing them in the 80s and 90s. They were able to keep them relevant for children because Nintendo still to this day very much a young audience focused first company. You know, they are all about trying to get children involved into the Nintendo ecosystem and keeping them as customers throughout their life. And when they start a family, having their kids be Nintendo customers and Nintendo fans. And, you know, for Capcom with Mega Man and Sega with Sonic, they just weren't able to do it. So with Mega Man, I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure, you can make Mega Man 12, and I'm sure there's going to be people that would buy it, and I'm sure there's going to be people that would enjoy it, but maybe it's time to take Mega Man somewhere else. Capcom is having a lot of success with Resident Evil and Street Fighter right now in particular, that maybe they have the budget and the ability to take a risk on a new kind of Mega Man. Now, I'm not saying you necessarily need to take Mega Man into the Resident Evil engine and make it, you know, this realistic third person run and gun kind of thing. But I think you could do a very stylized, cartoonish version of that, and that would be very successful. And I think that it would be worth for them to take the risk on it. I mean, why not? You know, I don't think one bad game right now is going to send Capcom into a downward spiral. They are gaining a lot of revenue from multiple games that have been very successful for them. They're bringing back some cult franchises like Dragon's Dogma. You know, they're willing to kind of take a chance on these games that were smaller properties for them and see if they can revitalize them and get them going into the mainstream. And I certainly can see them doing that for Mega Man. And honestly, I hope they would. I would love to see them take some kind of weird risk with Mega Man and put something out that, you know, you didn't even think of would be an idea for a Mega Man game, and hopefully it would work. So I would really like to see them do something like that, and I hope they do. But it sounds like from this quote that they don't, you know, they're sort of ruminating on a new Mega Man, but it seems like there's not going to be anyone in the pipeline anytime soon. All right, up next, an update on a story we talked about a little while ago, maybe a couple months ago at this point. But Yuji Naka, the man behind Sonic and Balan Wonderworld, he's bad. He's a bad boy. He did some bad things, and he has now gotten a $1.2 million fine, and he was sentenced to prison. But he will not be going to prison unless he violates the terms of this agreement. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison, suspended for 4 years. This is from Chris Scullion's article on Video Games Chronicle. Naka will escape a prison term as long as he adheres to the conditions set by the order and doesn't infringe on any further terms or laws during this time. So he had 2 fines equivalent to 173 million yen. Like I said, $1.2 million in US currency. He pled guilty to the charges in March, saying there's no doubt that he was guilty in taking part in the insider trading scheme. He was arrested in November of 2022. So they definitely got this going fairly quickly, you know, half a year later, essentially a little bit more than that. So basically what happened, if you're not familiar with it, he was working on Balan Wonderworld at Square Enix at the time. He was made aware of Japanese developer Aiming. They were working on a new Dragon Quest mobile game, and he found out about this before it was announced. And again, this is all from, I'm paraphrasing from the article on Video Games Chronicle. He then bought 10,000 shares of Aiming stock for about $20,000 with the intention of selling them once the game was announced and the stock value had increased. That is insider trading. That is illegal to do. He was then arrested a second time a month later in December 2022, relating to allegations he did a similar thing after learning confidential information that there was going to be a Final Fantasy VII mobile game. And then he bought 130,000 shares and earned a profit of $146,000 upon their sale. That is stuff that you can't do. You hear about that quite a bit here in America. There's been plenty of high-profile insider trading scandals with people going to prison. Probably the most famous one was Martha Stewart. If you're not familiar with Martha Stewart, she was, or still is, you know, she was a big deal in like home decor, cooking, presentation, all that kind of stuff. She was a big piece of American pop culture, and she went to prison for doing this. She went to prison for insider trading. She has certainly redeemed herself in the public eye and is back being relevant again. And, you know, she's certainly not as popular as she once was. But kind of her industry has shifted towards Instagram and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. So will Yuji Naka recover from this? Maybe. I don't know how things play out like this over in Japan. I know that, they take business relationships like that very seriously. I know crime is treated very seriously in Japan. So maybe he will be blackballed from the industry after this. Maybe he would have to start his own thing and seek outside funding and have to escape the traditional studio system. He previously worked with Sega, was working with Square Enix at the time. Maybe he would have to crowdfund instead. But his reputation just in general with video games has really taken a hit over the years. Balan Wonderworld became such a joke. It really was a huge joke in the industry because of how poor the game was and all the marketing surrounding it. And so it's sad, it'd be one thing to just say that like his career had a major fall from grace because he started making bad games. That happens all the time. That's not anything new. People definitely, if they have hits at the beginning of their career, they can't always kind of keep up with it. Look at Peter Molyneux. But it is very sad that is not necessarily how his career is coming to an end right now. Of course, it could be resurrected in the future, but now it's because of criminal reasons. It's part of the, he's fined a massive amount of money. He very narrowly avoided going to prison for a very long time. A 30-month prison term is certainly not nothing. I don't know what the Japanese prison system is like. I don't know how difficult Japanese prison is, but I have to imagine it's a hell of a lot less than having your freedom to go about your day and do what you want, when you wake up. So it's a big shame. And, he was somebody at one point that really was, I don't know if I would say he was like a pillar of the video game world, but he was known and respected, and his name at one point was synonymous with quality. And it's just sad that, he has lost that as well as now lost a lot of, favor in the public eye by being, this is obviously a very shameful thing to have to go through. So it's sad. I hope he could turn it around. At least it's insider trading and he's not going to prison for harming someone or something like that. It wasn't a violent crime. He wasn't, hurting other people. So I guess that is one saving grace with this. Then our last story for the week was kind of a real quick thing, and there isn't much information because it was a new game being announced, but it was really announced by a tweet and like a 15-second CG logo video. But Electronic Arts has announced the next entry in their UFC franchise. UFC 5 will be coming out. They said in September they will be doing a full reveal and discussing the game much more in depth. So I've kind of fallen off the UFC as a sport from following it. At one point I was watching pretty much every event and really deeply invested into the sport. But it kind of faded away. The UFC failed to create new stars, and I guess at that point I would have considered myself a hardcore fan, but then I turned into a casual fan, and then I turned into the point where I just wasn't watching at all. I've gotten back into watching a little bit more this year. There have been some good fights. This past weekend there were a couple of really big fights, and so I paid attention to those, watched the highlights. But I've definitely fallen off hard, but I enjoy the UFC video games, and the EA stuff is tough because the EA UFC games, the UFC license was with THQ, and THQ really overhauled UFC video games as a whole from the very bare bones, kind of basic, kind of wrestling game ripoff thing that they had become. They were very button mashy. There wasn't a lot of strategy technique to them. Most people kind of think of the original UFC game on Dreamcast, which still is a very fun game to play. But if you go back and play it now, you realize very quickly that it doesn't have any legs. It gets old very fast, and there's just not much to do. And it's a game that you could play for 30 minutes and you'd be okay with not playing it for another, years after that. But UFC, when they got to the THQ and THQ did the Undisputed games, Undisputed 1 I thought was very good. It was a big turnaround for the sport when it came to a video game adaptation. Undisputed 2, again, really built upon the foundation with the first game. But when Undisputed 3 came out, it really was a dream game for not just UFC fans, but for MMA fans, because at the time, there was still a little bit of competition in the mainstream in the mixed martial arts world. UFC has obviously always been the biggest player in that game, but at that time, they had competition with Strikeforce. Strikeforce, in some ways, was more seen by the public eye than UFC because they weren't on pay-per-view. They were on network television. They were on CBS. So a lot more eyeballs were on it, and to the point where they got their own game, oddly enough, made by EA. It was just called EA MMA, but it had the Strikeforce license in it. And one of the reasons why people really picked up on that game was, even though it didn't have the star power of the UFC fighters, it had game modes that allowed you to play with different rule sets, not just the UFC rules, because Pride, which was at the time the biggest organization in Japan, they fell apart due to some, Yakuza involvement. They had very different rules. You could kick an opponent while they were down in the head. You could knee him in the head, elbow him in the head at any given point. They really didn't have a lot of rules, and guys were getting fucked up in Pride, And so the EA game had those rules in it, and people were kind of flocking to that game. So when UFC Undisputed 3 came out, they actually, because UFC had purchased Pride, they put Pride in the game with the Pride commentators and the presentation and the announcer and the whole thing. They put younger version of the fighters in the game that you could go in there, and it was, from a gameplay wise, way superior to EA's game. From a presentation wise, way superior than EA's game. It was an incredible, incredible game. And this was at a point in time where EA still allowed the fighters to have sponsorships. And so they allowed you to have much more customization with the character through the career mode. You could earn these sponsorships, and I kind of felt like you were, moving forward and having all this momentum and stuff. And it was just, it was a lot easier to kind of role play in your own head with the game. And it was such a complete experience. And then THQ lost the license and EA got it. And the first EA UFC game was pretty bare bones, but it played okay. They used a lot of the same technology coming over from Fight Night, their boxing game, which was great, but MMA is not just standing up and throwing punches and kicks. It is a lot of groundwork, and they never figured out the ground game. And 4 games into the series, they still have not figured out the ground game. UFC 4 was really bare bones. It was so... they really kind of peppered in the blind bag ultimate stuff with microtransactions. The career mode was super basic. They had promised all these things were going to be in the career mode, and I guess technically on paper they were, but a lot of them, instead of being what you thought they were going to be, were like 5-second cutscenes that had music playing over them. They weren't even voiced. It was just kind of sad. The game was so focused on the online play, daily challenges and all this stuff. And it just kind of got to the point where it was like, man, these games are coming out and, it's their 4th one, and it feels like they're taking steps backwards, not steps forward. Now, I certainly don't have any confidence in the world that UFC 5 is going to be, a fleshed out experience like longtime fans of the sport would like to have. But it's an opportunity to try and do something new. I don't know if they actually will or not, but I am very curious. As somebody that has played all those games, I will play UFC 5 unless for some reason they really screw it up and it plays horribly. But I'd like to see them take a chance, take a little bit of a risk. EA doesn't necessarily have to always do the same thing every year. They do. They certainly do. If you've played Madden or FIFA or NHL, they certainly do the same thing every year, but they don't have to. So I hope that maybe they kind of realize that, like, hey, maybe we should shake things up a little bit. The last game wasn't super well received. A lot of people bounced off of it very quickly. So I don't know. I hope we get something good out of it. But that's going to wrap up the news for this week. So before we go, let's talk about what's coming up on the channel this week. So tomorrow will be the next episode of Full Motion Sickness. So look forward to that. Throughout the week, I'm sure we'll toss some more shorts up on the channel. Those have been doing really well. Thank you guys for watching those. I greatly appreciate it. We'll stream at some point this week, probably Friday night, I guess. I don't think I have too much going on this week. I do have a couple of house projects I'm still trying to tackle, so my time playing games is a little bit limited. But if the weather turns bad, then I'm forced inside and, giving me the opportunity to play some games. And, we'll check to see if there's any indie stuff coming out this week and talk about that. And then this show next week will be a little bit different because friend Davis is coming back. So my buddy Davis, who covered the Xbox showcase with me and then did that week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly with me, he will be back. So no Christian next week because I can't quite figure out, let's peel back the curtain a little bit for a second. I can't quite figure out how to make that work because he's not going to be here. When we recorded here in my house, you guys heard that episode. The audio was fucking terrible that episode because my mic was picking up his mic was picking up mine. The noise suppression stuff wasn't working. So we're going to do it. He's going to be in his home. I'm going to be in my home and we're going to do it remotely. And I think that will solve a lot of those problems, but I can't figure out how to get Christian's audio to him. And so Christian's taking the week off next week. He told me he is going off to the mountains. Isn't that right, Christian? You're heading out into the world.
Well, next week I'm not going to be here. Sorry to disappoint everyone. I have a retreat in the mountains that I signed up for with other demonically possessed household appliances. There's a toaster I hear that's inhabited by Kramer from Seinfeld, and that fuck owes me some money.
Awesome. Well, have fun with that, man. And if you get lost on the way home and can't figure out how to get back, boy, it'd be tough to not have you around anymore. But I understand it, buddy. You'll find your way. Maybe you could fall into your own river. So yeah, Davis will be here next week to join me on the show, and so obviously we'll talk about everything that he's been playing lately, whatever I pick up along the way, and yeah, it should be a good time. So yeah, some good stuff coming up on the channel. I'm still cracking away at that script for that next Perfect Reload video. Getting a third of the way done with the script. We're making progress on it a little bit by a little bit. I'd like to have it done by the end of the summer. So to me, I would say I'd like to have it done by the end of August. And so that's kind of the goal there. But yeah, once again, everybody, thanks for checking out the channel, gaining more subscribers every week as we've been doing it. That's amazing, and I hope you guys are enjoying the stuff. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's been a wild ride over the past couple of months. So I really can't thank you enough. But yeah, we'll be right back here next week with another episode. And until then, check out the stuff along the way. We'll see you for the stream this week, and take it easy.